Jack had always known his mother to be a quiet woman, strong, steady, and devoted entirely to him. For most of his life, it was just the two of them navigating the world with resilience and quiet grace. So when Uncle Dung, an old acquaintance from Jack's days working in construction, called and invited him for a conversation, Jack expected nothing more than a reunion over coffee. He didn't expect the conversation that would unfold. They met at a small cafe, one of those peaceful places tucked away from the bustle of town. Jack greeted him politely, took a seat, and asked what the meeting was about. Uncle Dung, a man with years written gently across his face, got straight to the point. He told Jack that over time, through shared memories and chance encounters, he had developed feelings for Jack's mother. At first, Jack sat in silence. It was not anger or rejection, just a pause, a deep breath, as he processed the words. His mother had spent her life giving everything for him. She had worked tirelessly, put aside her own joy, and rarely asked for anything in return. Jack's mind was flooded with those years of sacrifice. And now here was someone who saw her worth, someone who wanted to give her the kind of care she had so often given others. When Jack finally spoke, his voice was calm but sincere. He told Uncle Dung how much he admired his mother. To him, she was the strongest person he had ever known. And though he had never imagined a moment like this, he realized something important: his mother deserved to be happy. She deserved companionship, laughter, and someone who would stand beside her, especially now that she was older. Jack didn't hesitate to give his blessing. If your feelings are sincere, and you treat her with respect and kindness, Jack said, then I won't stand in the way. In fact, I hope she says yes. Buoyed by Jack's support, Uncle Dung arranged to meet Jack's mother. He invited her to the same cafe, intending to speak with honesty and vulnerability. They met in the afternoon, the sunlight falling gently through the leaves. Jack's mother arrived, looking elegant in her simplicity, with that same quiet strength she always carried. She smiled when she saw Dung, perhaps already sensing the seriousness in his eyes. After exchanging pleasantries, he looked at her and said softly, "I want to be with you. I don't want to wait. I know I'm not young anymore, and neither are you, and that's exactly why I want to spend what time we have left together, with peace, companionship, and warmth." His words weren't rehearsed, but real. They came from a man who had lost before, who knew the weight of time, and who had finally found someone he wanted to share his days with. She listened carefully, not interrupting. Then with grace and honesty, she thanked him. She acknowledged the affection and sincerity in his words, but she also admitted she wasn't ready. "Jack still hasn't built his own family," she said gently. "As a mother, I've always put him first. I still do. I want to see him settled, happy, married. Then I can think about myself." Her response wasn't a rejection, but a request for time, for understanding. She wasn't closing the door, only asking that he wait until her heart could follow. That conversation opened something in Jack's mother that had long been hidden beneath responsibility. She remembered what it felt like to be seen as a woman, not just a mother. But even in this moment, her thoughts circled back to her son. Jack had been her world for so long. She had raised him through poverty, hardship, and loneliness. Every success he achieved felt like her own. Her love had been unconditional, and if she ever asked for anything in return, it was only that he be safe, kind, and fulfilled. In Dung's offer, she saw a new possibility, but she needed time to let go of the habit of sacrificing herself. Meanwhile, Jack continued his day, as if nothing had changed on the surface. But inside, something was shifting. He thought about that cafe conversation and the way Dung had spoken about his mother. Jack began to see how even in adulthood, he had still been at the center of her world. And maybe it was time for him to release her from that quiet burden. It wasn't just about giving permission. It was about letting her know that she didn't have to wait for him anymore, that he was ready to stand on his own, that she could choose happiness now, not later. At the same time, another figure in this story observed everything with quiet presence. Tu Tien. A longtime friend to both Jack and his mother, she had been by their side for years, kind, reliable, and content to support from the background. She went with Jack to the construction site that day, listened to his reflections and shared moments of quiet companionship. She noticed how Jack cared deeply for those around him and admired his calm in the face of personal change. Tu Tien too was someone who had lived a life of subtle sacrifice, content in simplicity, but always giving. She saw, perhaps before Jack himself did, that this season of their lives was a turning point. At work, Jack remained a respected engineer. That very day, someone approached him to ask for help designing a new house. He had long moved from laborer to designer, from builder to visionary. Yet as successful as he had become, what mattered most to him were relationships, the people who had stood beside him through the climb. He thought of Deng, not just as a suitor to his mother, but as someone who had once worked beside him in the dust and sun building bridges. Their shared past gave the present more weight. It wasn't a stranger courting his mother, but someone who had carried the same burdens, who knew what it meant to build something from the ground up. What Jack didn't say aloud, but began to feel more deeply, was that life wasn't just about obligation. It was about choosing peace where you could, trusting people to love those you loved. As he watched his mother and Deng sit together under the golden canopy of a cafe afternoon, laughing softly, he saw something he hadn't expected: ease. They fit in the way quiet people often do. No fireworks, just warmth. Perhaps this was love's second act. Not rushed, not dramatic, just two souls reaching for each other before it was too late. Later that evening, as the skies dimmed and the day folded into twilight, Jack and Tu Tien returned to the farm. The ride back was quieter than usual. The motorbike hummed gently beneath them, and the wind carried a calmness that neither of them wanted to interrupt. Tu Tien held on to Jack not out of fear, but out of quiet understanding. She had been there through seasons of hardship and recovery, and she understood the weight of the choices Jack was now carrying. She could feel the change in him, not a discomfort, but a subtle shift, like a door being opened inward after a long time closed. When they arrived, the house was peaceful. The air smelled of rain on soil and the faint sweetness of overripe fruit. Jack parked the bike, helped Tu Tien off, and for a moment they stood there, letting silence speak for them. Tu Tien turned to him, her voice soft. "If your mom is happy, then that's enough, right?" Jack looked at her and nodded. She's given up too much to be alone forever. Later, Jack found himself seated across from his mother again, this time not as protector or provider, but as a son who was finally willing to share the weight of love and life. She poured tea with practiced ease, and he watched her, wondering how many times she had poured tea for others, while quietly longing for someone to pour it for her. The lines on her hands told stories he would never fully know. He cleared his throat, and with a steady voice said, "Mom, I meant what I said earlier. You deserve to be loved not just by your son, but by someone who sees you completely." His mother looked at him for a long time. Her eyes didn't well with tears, but there was a softness there, a quiet relief. "I raised you to be strong," she said, "but I never expected that one day you'd be the one to tell me it's okay to let go." Jack reached for her hand and held it gently. "It's time, Mom." Meanwhile, Uncle Deng was not resting easy. After their conversation, he had returned to his own home, reflecting on what had just unfolded. He had seen hope in her eyes, but also hesitation. He understood. Life had not been simple for either of them. He knew better than to push. Love at their age wasn't about pursuit, it was about patience. He sat by the window, watching the light fade across his quiet yard, and whispered to no one in particular, "If she needs time, I will wait." The following morning, life continued its gentle rhythm. The sun rose, casting golden rays across the fields. Jack was already up, checking on the irrigation site where the bridge was being built. He greeted the workers, gave instructions, reviewed the design, a calm leader amid the noise. But even while surrounded by blueprints and machinery, his mind wandered. He thought about the bridge, not just the one across the stream, but the one he had been building slowly between his past and his future, between himself and the people he loved. Back at the farm, Tu Tien prepared breakfast. She didn't say much, but her presence grounded the space. She had always been a part of their lives in the quietest ways, folding laundry, planting herbs, listening without judgment. Jack's mother sat beside her peeling fruit. They didn't talk about love or dung or futures. They just sat, two women who understood that sometimes the heart needs space to grow quietly. It was only in the late afternoon that the three of them sat down again, this time under the shade of the tamarind tree out back. Jack had returned from work, dusty but satisfied. His mother handed him a cool glass of water. Tu Tien brought out a plate of sliced guava and salt. The conversation turned to light things, how the fish in the pond were growing, whether the tomatoes would ripen before the next rain. And then slowly, the air shifted. "I saw Dung again this morning," Jack's mother said, her voice steady. "He brought flowers to the market stall I sometimes pass by." Jack said nothing at first, just nodded. "And how did that feel?" he asked finally. She paused, like something I didn't know I missed. Tu Tien smiled faintly, but said nothing. She was not the center of this story. She knew her role, and she played it well, constant, kind, and ever observant. Jack looked between the two women and felt something in his chest settle. This was what healing looked like. Not grand gestures, not speeches. Just people trying day after day to choose connection over fear. When evening came, they all shared dinner. The meal was simple: stir-fried vegetables, steamed rice, salted fish, but it was seasoned with peace. After the dishes were cleared and the stars began to show through the night sky, Jack took a quiet walk to the edge of the pond. He looked out over the still water, the reflections soft and broken only by the occasional ripple. He thought about everything that had changed and everything that hadn't. He thought about how time had shaped them all, his mother, Uncle Dung, Tu Tien, even himself. And he realized something vital. Life was not about preventing pain. It was about making space for love, even when it arrives later than expected. Especially then. Behind him, the house glowed warmly in the dark. Voices floated gently from the kitchen. His mother was laughing. It had been years since he heard that sound in such a pure, unguarded way. Jack closed his eyes for a moment and listened. This, he thought, is what it means to come home.